10. Shot on a Zoom call. A mother in Florida should have taken better care of her loaded weapons. The 21-year-old mom, identified by the authorities as Shamaya Lynn, was participating in a Zoom call for work. While she was on the call, she allowed her toddler to roam around the house by themselves. But as the toddler was roaming, it came across a firearm. The kid simply picked up a handgun that had bullets in it, the safety off, and was ready to rock. The gun had been left completely in the open. The shot came when Shamaya's co-workers heard a loud bang and saw her fall back and hit the ground. Everybody in the Zoom work call literally saw the toddler sneak up behind her and blow her brains out with a loaded gun. According to the Altamont Springs police, after she fell back in the chair, the others in the Zoom call saw the toddler standing there in the background, the gun clutched tightly in both hands. It was one of the participants of the Zoom meeting who called 911. When the police arrived at the house, they found Shamaya dead with a single gunshot wound to her face. The bullet went into her brain and killed her immediately. The toddler was left okay, just a bit shaken and not completely understanding what happened. 9. Brooke Skylar Richardson. In 2019, Brooke Skylar Richardson became famous for all the wrong reasons. She was convicted by a jury of abuse of a corpse. It's a pretty grisly thing to be found guilty of, especially when that corpse was your baby daughter. Richardson was only 18 years old when she gave birth in secret. She was a high school senior who didn't know what to do with a baby. It didn't help her situation that her family was utterly useless. She was so scared of revealing her pregnancy that she went the entire 9 months hiding it. Then, when she finally had the baby by herself, no hospital, no pain medication, no drugs of any kind, she buried it in the backyard. She was originally brought up on charges of aggravated murder and involuntary manslaughter, accused of deliberately killing her newborn. But according to her attorneys, Richardson believed she had a stillborn and didn't know what else to do except bury it. Her excuse was that she didn't even think the baby was alive, and so she had to give it a proper burial by herself. On the other hand, prosecutors argued against her, saying it was the perfect crime. Authorities didn't actually discover the dead baby until all that remained were bones. It was a pretty bizarre case, and Richardson was ultimately acquitted of the harsher charges of murder. This left her with a lesser charge of abusing a corpse. She didn't have to go to jail and was given 3 years of probation. During the pandemic, she even managed to get off her probation and is now a free woman. 8. The Wrong Baby. A young mother from Los Angeles and her husband are in the process of suing a fertility clinic for negligence and malpractice. Daphna Cardinale alleges that she gave birth to the wrong baby after the doctors at the clinic implanted a total stranger's embryo into her body. This was during a vitro fertilization treatment. She and her husband Alexander believe the California Center for Reproductive Health either knowingly lost the embryo they were supposed to be given, or they gave it to somebody else. And then when they realized they had the wrong embryo, they stuck a random one in Daphna, thinking she'd never noticed. When the young mother finally gave birth 9 months later, the first thing she noticed was that her baby didn't look like anyone in her family. On both sides of the family tree, the couple's lineages are about as white as it gets. Yet their baby was born with jet black hair and a much darker complexion than anybody in their bloodlines for the past 500 years. But before we get into an argument about recessive genes, it's important to know that Alexander and Daphna got DNA testing done. The genetic tests revealed that the baby she carried for 9 months and then raised for the first few months of its life was not genetically related to either of them. In other words, this woman accidentally gave birth to the biological child of total strangers. She may have grown it in her body, but it wasn't related to her in the slightest. 7. Abandoning a baby. On the Birch Hill Free Church of Scotland, located on the small island of PEI in Canada, a body was found. It was a brisk Sunday afternoon when the caretaker of the church walked up the hill to turn on the heat. He was getting prepared for the church service later in the evening, but as he walked up the steps, he noticed there was something amiss. Somebody had left a baby on a bench outside the church. This wasn't a warm summer day. It was cold and snowing in Atlantic Canada. Somebody, most likely a young mother, wrapped a baby in some cloth and then just put it on the bench in the front of the church in the cold. The caretaker picked up the baby and got a hold of the police immediately. But here's where things get truly tragic and disturbing. This is not one of those cases that turned out happily with a baby being adopted by its rescuers. The infant had already passed on to the other side. And despite a police investigation that went on for over a month, whoever left the child at the church remains a mystery. Police have treated the case like a homicide investigation, yet they have made no progress towards an arrest. It's become a pretty strange local mystery for the people of the town. This is a very small place called Mount Albion, really in the middle of nowhere. The cops haven't identified any mother who recently gave birth but doesn't still have their baby. And it couldn't have possibly come from any other town because that would have been a very long and pointless journey to dump a baby. It was definitely someone in the town, someone who managed to hide a pregnancy and dispose of a baby in complete secrecy. 6. Free baby. A customer at a sandwich restaurant in New Jersey was given a newborn baby completely free of charge. It wasn't the restaurant that handed over the baby, but a young girl of just 14 who gave birth in the bathroom. She carried the baby out into the restaurant and handed it over to a couple. The incident was captured on surveillance footage from the El Patron restaurant, then uploaded online for the entire world to see. According to the restaurant owner, Frankie Aguilar, the young woman first walked up to the counter. She told the employees that she had found the infant girl in the bathroom. This proved to be a lie, but she was just trying to escape the embarrassment of the moment. She then handed the baby to Elise Scott, who was eating with her boyfriend Walter. As Elise was checking the baby's vitals to make sure it was okay, the teen mom slinked out the door and was gone. The baby ended up okay in the end. At last we heard it was put up for adoption. The teenage mom isn't facing any charges. And to be honest, everyone is just happy that she did the right thing by handing the baby off to another person. It was better than leaving it in the bathroom where it could have perished. What would you do if someone handed you a baby at a sandwich shop? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe before the end of the video. 5. Short notice. A teenage girl went to the hospital because she had tremendous stomach pain. It was August, the air was warm, and the 17-year-old girl thought she was dying. It felt like her stomach was caving in on itself, and she had horrible cramps like she'd never experienced before. Her name is Alicia Ford, and she was 9 months pregnant but didn't know it. When she got to the hospital and the doctors looked at her, they realized she was having a baby. Then they told her she was pregnant, and she could hardly believe it. It took about 5 hours from this point to have the baby, meaning she only mentally experienced pregnancy from the time she got to the hospital until the time the baby came out. When she arrived, she was 43 weeks pregnant and 2.4 inches dilated. If you know anything about pregnancies, you'll know that 43 weeks is considered overdue. 42 weeks is overdue, and 43 is extreme. This means she carried her baby 3 weeks past the prime it was supposed to be birthed, and she still had no idea. We all know what you're thinking, and that's not the case. The teenager didn't gain any weight during her pregnancy. She was slim as a board and her stomach was completely flat. And yet, when she gave birth, baby Harper was perfectly healthy. He weighed 7 pounds and 6.5 ounces. 4. The youngest mom in Britain. Get ready for the most shocking thing you've heard all day. An 11-year-old has become the youngest mom in recorded history to give birth in the United Kingdom. It happened in the summer of 2021, with a child getting pregnant at the young age of 10. We've all heard about teen moms, but this girl wasn't even a teenager yet. She was basically an infant herself. Dr. Carol Cooper told news sources that this is the youngest mother she has ever heard of in her professional career. She says the reason this child was able to give birth was probably because of hormones. She says that because children are getting heavier and heavier, girls are going into puberty earlier and earlier. This young girl hit puberty shockingly early. But that's not even the worst part. She then became sexually active, which is insane. The good news is that the girl and the baby are both okay. Social Services is now investigating the situation surrounding the pregnancy, and hopefully they don't find out anything even more shocking. 3. Baby in the dumpster. In New Mexico, Alexis Avila was arrested on charges of attempted murder and child abuse after she threw her baby in the trash. The evidence in the case was overwhelming. Alexis was caught on video literally throwing her newborn son into a dumpster like he was a half-finished plate of fries. Her excuse, at least what she told the police, was that she hadn't known she was pregnant until the day before the delivery. She had the baby in the bathroom and didn't know what to do. Luckily, the baby was found alive on Friday night after it had been in the dumpster for 6 whole hours. The acting chief of the Hobbs Police Department says he's never seen a case like this in all of his life. The New Mexican teen had driven around looking for the right dumpster to deposit her body in. She chose one in a dark neighborhood where nobody would hear its screams. This shows that the attempted murder was cold and calculated. Alexis is now looking at 15 years in prison for this terrible crime. 2. Baby in the shower. A young mom of 17 secretly gave birth at her house. She had what you might call a traditional shower birth, though she wasn't super thrilled about it. She had no idea what she was doing and just allowed nature to take its course. Then, once the baby was brought into the world, the girl walked 4 blocks to the hospital with a baby in her arms, still attached by its umbilical cord. She hadn't figured out how to disconnect the baby from her belly. Her name is Jochita Para, and she had wanted to call 911 but couldn't because her phone was disconnected. She could have gotten help from the neighbors, but she didn't want to wake anybody so early in the morning. She got dressed, then jogged to the hospital on foot. It was actually a pretty tragic case. Everything turned out all right for the teen and her baby in the end, but the whole mess of running to the hospital at 6 a.m. could have been avoided. She had kept her pregnancy secret from her parents because she was scared of her mom. She thought her mother would kick her out of the house, which would have left her homeless with a baby. But now that Zochita's done it all by herself, the mother has accepted the situation and welcomed the infant into the family. 1. Trapped in a shelter. A baby of just 15 months was trapped with her mother for 5 days inside a homeless shelter in New York City. When the baby was finally discovered, it was wildly dehydrated and her mother was dead. The mother passed on from an accidental drug overdose, and the baby was left there huddled next to her cold, dead body. The father of the baby is now trying to sue the city of New York and the Department of Homeless Services for $5 million. It was his daughter, Lyric LaBoy, who was found by workers at the East River Family Center. How it all happened is a little confusing. You see, Lyric and her young mother were living at an apartment-type complex inside the shelter in East Harlem. The apartment was private, yet the pair definitely should have been checked on. Nobody bothered looking into the apartment until they smelled a horrible odor leaking out of it. And that was when the baby was found. Lyric's mother had chosen to do drugs, the overdose was accidental, and so there was nobody to take care of the baby for almost a week. It's a miracle the child is still alive.
Number 11. Emma Jane Maxson. Emma Jane Maxson and her boyfriend James Knight were both in their 20s when they were thrown out of a taxi in 2016 for arguing after a night out drinking in Leicestershire, England. Earlier that night, James had been asked to leave a bar because of his concerning behavior. The couple continued to fight in the street and at Emma's home. At some point during the heated argument, the young woman stabbed Knight in the chest with a steak knife, and he died. On the surface, it may seem like Emma killed her boyfriend in cold blood during an uncontrolled fit of rage, but some domestic violence advocates saw the situation differently. Emma's mother, Joanne Smith, told the BBC that her daughter had changed throughout her relationship with Knight. She went from being bubbly and full of life to withdrawn and always covered in suspicious bruises. During her trial, Emma's lawyers argued that the relationship was physically and emotionally abusive. They accused James of using steroids and other drugs, claiming that the substances made him unpredictable and aggressive. Emma had miscarried before his death, and he allegedly blamed her for losing the baby. She said that she stabbed James in self-defense after he grabbed her by the throat and began strangling her, and that she never meant to kill him. She just wanted him to stop hurting her. Meanwhile, Knight's mother, Trish, denied that her son was a violent person. Emma's apparently unrushed efforts to get medical help for James sealed her fate. She underwent 2 trials and was found guilty of murdering him both times. Nobody but Emma will ever truly know what happened that fateful night, but she's paying for it. She'll serve at least 17 years before she's considered for parole. Number 10. Justin Medoff. 31-year-old law student Justin Medoff called the Las Vegas police last year after he allegedly awoke to find his girlfriend, 28-year-old Stephanie Duarte, beaten, bloody, and unconscious. Officers reported to the couple's hotel room to find it covered in blood after Justin reportedly bathed and tried to revive Stephanie. When emergency responders tried to perform CPR on the young woman, they realized that she was in rigor mortis, the state of decomposition where a body becomes stiff after being dead for several hours. Stephanie died by blunt force trauma to the head, sometime after both parties had argued while out in public, and returned separately to the hotel room. Hotel guests reported hearing the pair arguing between 2 and 3 o'clock a.m., and officers noticed red marks on Medoff's body. He eventually admitted that the two had argued while they were out, and that they went home separately. He continued to claim that he woke to find Stephanie bludgeoned and deceased. Police arrested Medoff for open murder with the use of a deadly weapon. It looks as though the aspiring young attorney's future has changed dramatically, as he finds himself on the opposite side of the law that he never meant to be on. Number 9. Heather Berry. Police in Visalia, California rushed to the home of Ramsey and Heather Berry last year after receiving a call from a resident who claimed that they'd heard gunshots and a man screaming for help. Officers found 47-year-old Ramsey outside on the ground with multiple gunshot wounds to his torso. They theorized that violence erupted during an argument about the couple's 2 children, who were both under the age of 10 at the time. The kids were at home when 43-year-old Heather allegedly shot Ramsey multiple times, leaving him critically injured but expected to recover. This wasn't the first time the police were called to the residence. In fact, they had been there several times before in response to domestic violence-related complaints. Records show that almost every year from 2014 to 2020, Heather had tried getting domestic violence protection from Ramsey for herself and their children. She's out on $500,000 bond while facing charges for attempted homicide and child endangerment. In the meantime, investigators are trying to determine exactly what happened and if Heather shot her husband in self-defense. Number 8. Woman beheads husband. A 50-year-old woman in the Indian state of Andhra Pradesh is making headlines for allegedly cutting her husband's head off with a sharp knife and bringing it to a local police station in a plastic bag. Identified only as Vasundhara, she reportedly got into a heated argument with 53-year-old Bashyam Ravichandar in late January. They hurled threats at one another, and things eventually turned violent. Vasundhara brutally stabbed her husband to death and decapitated him. She then hand-delivered his head to the authorities, where she set the bag on a table and surrendered for the crime. The couple's 20-year-old son was not at home when the brutal slaying occurred. Police charged Vasundhara with murder and rushed the couple's home to retrieve the rest of the victim's remains. Neighbors told investigators that they had overheard the pair arguing a lot over the last year or so, but I'm sure nobody imagined that it would go as far as it did. Number 7. Svetlana Boyarinova. While barbecuing with some friends in Russia's Chelyabinsk region a few years ago, 27-year-old Svetlana Boyarinova began accusing her boyfriend, Evgeny Solyanik, of cheating on her. This was nothing new. Boyarinova frequently hurled allegations of infidelity at Solyanik, who constantly denied having a wandering eye. But Svetlana took things too far that day. She allegedly threw rocks at her boyfriend, and then threw herself on top of him. Then, she stabbed him in the chest with a 2-foot-long skewer. Svetlana immediately pulled the skewer out and took Solyanik to the hospital. where he was treated and released. The couple went back to the gathering and continued their day as usual. By the following morning, the injured man's condition had worsened to the point where Svetlana rushed him back to the emergency room. As it turned out, his heart and lungs were punctured from the attack. Doctors performed emergency surgery, but it was too late to save Soljanik's life. He died during the procedure. Svetlana confessed to stabbing a boyfriend and was charged with manslaughter. She received a 6.5-year prison sentence and was ordered to compensate the victim's family. The crazed killer argued in court that doctors were responsible for Soljanik's death because they had failed to treat him properly. But it was clear that Svetlana had a serious jealousy problem. In fact, it wasn't the first time she had stabbed the man. She apologized to Soljanik's family in court, but for them, her remorseful words were too little too late. If you were at the barbecue that day, would you have done anything to prevent what happened? Let us know in the comments below, and if you liked this video, be sure to subscribe. Number 6. Nicholas Foreman and Sabrina Haruni. 24-year-old Nicholas Foreman and his girlfriend, 22-year-old Sabrina Haruni, were on their way home from watching Super Bowl at a local bar last year when Sabrina received a text message from an ex-boyfriend. The Uber driver who took the couple to the Foreman's home in Perkiomen Township, Pennsylvania, would later tell authorities that a vicious argument broke out between the two. The fight continued after they were dropped off. By then, the Uber driver had become so concerned for Sabrina's safety that he stayed in the driveway for a few minutes. Foreman allegedly demanded to see his girlfriend's phone, telling her that he wouldn't let her leave until he saw it. The noise eventually stopped. Figuring everything had calmed down, the Uber driver left. Foreman beat Sabrina to death and recorded a video of himself taunting her while she was unresponsive, stating, "This is what a cheating liar gets." The next day, he ordered an Uber, loaded Sabrina's dead body into the car, and had the driver take them to the hospital, where she was pronounced dead. Foreman told the police that 3 women had attacked her, but they didn't buy the story. He was convicted of first-degree murder and received a life sentence. Number 5. Himanshu M. Tana. 59-year-old Himanshu M. Tana and his wife of 40 years own a beer and wine store in Montgomery County, Maryland. They recently got into a disagreement over the future of the business, and its lease was about to expire. The husband was reportedly against renewing the lease, but his 59-year-old wife, Alka H. Tana, insisted that they should renew. After owning the store for 3 years, they had run into financial problems. The pair were also arguing because the $200,000 in cash they had stashed away in the home was dwindling. Alka was allegedly taking money from the rainy day fund and wouldn't tell Himanshu what she was spending it on. While running errands recently, the couple stopped at Capital One Bank so that Alka could make a deposit while Himanshu waited in the car. When she exited the business, he ran her over with their SUV, killing her and crashing the vehicle into a pole. Alka was pronounced dead at the scene. Himanshu supposedly confessed to the crime and faces a first-degree murder charge. Customers who have been leaving flowers outside the couple's liquor store keep relaying similar statements to news reporters that Alka was a nice woman, but her husband was known to be curt and rude. Number 4. An almost murder-suicide. A 22-year-old woman in Delhi, India, narrowly escaped with her life recently when her husband stabbed her at least 30 times in a fit of rage. He tracked her down at her mother's house, where she had gone to get away from him after a fight, and waited to confront her until her mom had left the house to go grocery shopping. The enraged man viciously slashed his wife's face and neck at least 30 times with a surgical blade before taking his own life, thinking she was dead. But the woman miraculously survived, receiving a much-deserved second chance at life. Relatives told investigators that the couple had a history of getting into petty arguments and that they thought a trivial disagreement probably sparked the tragic attack. The suspect initially evaded police, but they caught up with him at a vacant home owned by his brother-in-law, where he was hiding out. His family told detectives that he has a drug problem and that his relationship with his wife was strained. They also said that the victim would often complain to them about her husband's behavior. Domestic violence is a major problem in India, where cases like this frequently make news headlines. Clinical psychologist Rajat Mitra told the Hindustan Times that India's legal and criminal justice systems view domestic violence as something that happens within the privacy of someone's home, and that couples should be left to sort the disagreements out by going to marriage counseling. Sadly, this isn't always the case. Mitra pointed out that roughly 30% of India's domestic violence cases can't be solved by conventional means. This is especially evident in cases where a partner is especially suspicious of the other, or has a mental disorder that makes them prone to violent outbursts. He advised that a person should immediately leave the relationship at the first sign of violence, and almost any expert would agree that he's absolutely right. Number 3. Shawanda Hill. Arguing while driving is never a good idea. While it's easy to think that you can carry on a serious and perhaps heated discussion while focusing on the road, getting your emotions worked up while operating a vehicle never ends well. 51-year-old Heaven A. Solo L and his wife, 45-year-old Shawanda Hill, are a good example of why. They got into a disagreement late last year while traveling on a highway in Bedford County, Virginia, in the middle of the night. Shawanda was driving when Heaven allegedly pushed the steering wheel, causing the car to run off the road and overturn. He was ejected from the vehicle and died. According to police, he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. His wife sustained minor injuries, but she could face a world of other problems. At the time of the accident, Virginia State Police said that they were considering charges against Shawanda for reckless driving. Number 2. Olga Volkova and Yevgeny Karlagin. When a couple is caught up in the heat of an argument, it's easy for them to forget about their surroundings. In the case of Olga Volkova and Yevgeny Karlagin, they became so oblivious that they put their own safety at risk. The couple, who have a young son together, was arguing on a second-floor balcony in St. Petersburg, Russia last year, when they leaned on the railing and fell 25 feet onto the concrete below. A bystander with medical training took their pulses, and it turned that they were both alive. Both Volkova and Karlagin were rushed to the hospital with a few broken limbs, but not any serious life-threatening injuries. The St. Petersburg State Prosecutor's Office said that it was looking into whether the balcony was structurally unsound. An onlooker who captured the frightening incident on camera told the press that they were filming the city's historic scenery when they heard the disagreement and hit the record button. Footage of the terrifying plunge went viral online, reminding us all to be careful about where we get into our next argument. Number 1. Spaghetti Spat. 45-year-old Stephanie Lannis and her 35-year-old boyfriend, Adolfo Rivera, were enjoying some dinner and drinks last summer at their Clearwater, Florida home when an argument broke out. They'd probably had a little too much to drink, and things quickly became violent, with the pair allegedly shoving their plates of spaghetti into one another's faces. Police arrived at the scene around 1 in the morning and found the couple still covered in their food. They were both arrested for domestic violence and spent the night in jail. A judge released them on their own recognizance and permitted them to continue having contact. Like many couples who find themselves in trouble with law for taking their fights too far, this wasn't Lannis and Rivera's first run-in with the police. During another drunken fight in late 2020, Stephanie was arrested for stabbing Rivera in the arm. She was initially charged with felony aggravated battery, but the case was dropped while she dealt with several narcotics possessions charges.
Number 10. Slapping passengers. A former Playboy model was arrested after a bizarre outburst on a Delta flight. The ex-model went on an insane tirade and slapped a bunch of passengers across the face. Her name is Patricia Cornwall. Besides being a model for Playboy, she was also an actress in the show Baywatch. It was the FBI who made the arrest after she disrupted her flight from Tampa to Atlanta. According to fellow passengers and employees with their airline, she caused a mid-air disturbance, and luckily for all of us, the disturbance was caught on video and spread around the internet. But here's when things got controversial. We've all seen the videos of anti-maskers freaking out in department stores and making a scene. But this was the opposite. Patricia got angry because a man sitting near her wasn't wearing a mask, and yet she wasn't wearing a mask either. She had it tucked under her chin. Patricia screamed at him to put his mask on. He called her a Karen and told her to sit down. Then she slapped him across the face and shrieked, "You're going to jail." We don't know what got into Patricia to make her have such a crazy outburst in the middle of a flight, but she ended up being dragged away by crew members. They took her down the aisle where she flailed and screamed and cursed. If she had really been so worried about his mask, she probably shouldn't have also spat on him. When the flight finally landed at the Atlanta International Airport, the model was the one who got arrested. Number 9. Accidental stabbing. Jeannie Exum, a model on Instagram and OnlyFans, was arrested for stabbing her boyfriend. The police received a call on a Monday evening just before 7 o'clock. A man had been assaulted inside of an apartment in Manhattan on 10th Avenue. The NYPD said in a statement that when they arrived, the man told them he'd gotten in an argument with his girlfriend. His girlfriend, the model, lashed out and stabbed him in the arm with a kitchen knife. Then she plunged it into his back. She stabbed him in the back in the most literal sense of the phrase. The boyfriend was transported to the hospital in stable condition, and Jeannie Gruesome was arrested. The boyfriend, identified as Francis Amore, is also an internet personality. The judge put a no-contact order against Jeannie, barring her from being close to or even speaking with Francis. Jeannie is also facing a felony assault charge. The wounds may have only been superficial, with her boyfriend getting a few stitches and being released from the hospital. But she still stabbed somebody. The only thing is that the boyfriend doesn't want the case to go forward, so she'll probably get away clean. It's not even the first time she's gotten in trouble with the law. Just a little while ago, the Instagram model got in some hot water for flashing the cops and posting a picture of it on Instagram. Number 8. 14 wounds. Melanie was discovered dead in her guest house with 14 stab wounds. It happened in Rosario, Argentina. Melanie's friend became concerned after no one had heard from her for a while. She wasn't answering her phone calls. The most telling sign was that she hadn't been active on social media for over 48 hours. This was very unusual for her, and it prompted friends and family to call the police. The cops then got a hold of her sister, who happened to have a spare key to the guest house where she was staying. When the cops entered the guest house, they found Melanie's lifeless corpse. Melanie was a model on OnlyFans. Her body was on the floor of the guest house, her head resting on the side of the mattress, and stab wounds all across her body. It looked like somebody went berserk on her with no rhyme or reason. The front door hadn't been burst open, the window wasn't forced, and the lights were off. But the TV was turned on and cranked to full volume. The only item missing from the guest house was her cell phone. Clearly, somebody wanted to cover their tracks. It was quite a mystery for the police, who haven't actually solved it yet. Eyewitnesses say they saw one male person entering the lodgings and then leaving early in the morning. He'd been several times going in and out. It must have been somebody the model knew, but nobody has been able to identify the mysterious guy yet. The most popular theory right now is that she has been having an affair with somebody. She kept it a secret from her friends, and that secret lover ended up being a psychotic murderer. Number 7. The Cat Model. A model was arrested in the Brazilian coastal town of Matinho back in November. She was arrested for the part she played in the assassination of her husband, which took place during their son's birthday party. Her name is Camila Marodin, an online model and fashion influencer. Her husband, Ricardo Marodin, was believed by local police to be the leader of a drug cartel, but after his death, that proved not to be the case. They now believe it was actually his model wife who was in charge of the entire cartel. They're now trying to bring her up on 3 murder charges, 1 for her husband and 2 for a pair of cops who were assassinated. Camila's capture was part of a military police operation in which they arrested 14 other members of the cartel. They went to her house and carried out the arrest warrant, only to discover she already fled. But she wasn't that hard to track down, and police managed to snag her as she tried to run away to her mother's house. As for why she shot down her husband, it wasn't Camila herself who pulled the trigger. It was members of the criminal gang she was in charge of. 4 armed suspects showed up to her son's 4th birthday party and executed her husband. They used the same vehicle that was involved in the assassination of 2 cops just days before. But why she orchestrated such a brutal killing is still under investigation. Why do you think she wanted her husband dead? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Number 6. Run down by a train. In Texas, a 19-year-old model was run over by a train in a horrible photo shoot gone wrong. A local official says that the exact reason why people aren't supposed to play on railroad tracks. The Texas teen, identified as Fredzania Thompson, was new to the world of modeling and needed some good photos. She and her photographer went to Navasota, about 60 miles from Houston. It was the middle of the afternoon, and the photographer had Fredzania stand between 2 sets of tracks. Lo and behold, 2 trains began to approach from opposite directions. The problem really was that there were 2 trains. They were both blowing their horns, but the model only thought there was one coming at her. She moved out of the path of the train she saw in front of her, unwittingly walking directly into the path of a different train. She never even saw it coming. She stepped out of the way of imminent death and fell directly into her grave. Number 5. A bad influence. A man killed his family in a bizarre incident involving a webcam girl. His name is Grant Amato, a Florida native who had no job and no prospects in life. He was completely obsessed with an online model who performed adult shows on her webcam. The webcam model, a random woman from Bulgaria, had no idea that she was inspiring a psychopath to take out his whole family. According to prosecutors in the case, Grant only murdered his family after they gave him an ultimatum. They said he needed to stop his unhealthy relationship with the Bulgarian model and get off the adult website, or they would cut him off completely. The reason his parents were so upset was that he had already stolen over $200,000 from family members to continue tipping the model online. This was the only way he could sustain his relationship with her. When his parents cut him off, he was so angry that he killed his mother and left her face down on the computer desk. He then waited for his father to get home from work before killing him too. When his brother arrived home later, he shot him in the head and then set it up to make it look as though his brother had done a murder-suicide. But of course, the cops were able to look at the clues and figure out what really happened. Grant has since been given life in prison, narrowly escaping the death penalty. Number 4. The OnlyFans Pimp. A Florida woman named LaShawna Williams has been arrested and charged with second-degree murder. According to the police, she allegedly killed her boyfriend by zipping him up in a suitcase and leaving him to suffocate. But that's only one piece of the bizarre story. Detectives say that LaShawna was a model on OnlyFans who had solo photographs as well as videos of herself and her boyfriend. It started out small, but she actually started to make some money. When her boyfriend realized how much money she was bringing in through her activities on OnlyFans, he told her that he wanted a cut of the action. In other words, he tried to become her OnlyFans pimp. Sadly for him, he didn't turn out to be a very tough pimp. LaShawna managed to manhandle her boyfriend into a suitcase and zip it closed. But she had been drinking at the time and passed out afterwards. She didn't wake up until 11 o'clock the next morning. By then, her boyfriend had been in the bag for hours. He ran out of air and suffocated, slowly dying as he tried desperately to free himself from a measly suitcase. Number 3. Jasmine Fior. Jasmine Fior was a California model whose body was discovered in August of 2009, stuffed into a suitcase. Her remains had been so badly mutilated that nobody could identify her. Police investigators only figured out who she was when they looked at the serial numbers of her breast implants. At the time of her death, she was just 28 years old. The police had one suspect and one suspect only, former reality TV contestant Ryan Jenkins. He was Jasmine's husband at the time of the death. Just 1 week after his wife was found in the suitcase, he too was discovered dead in a hotel room in the small Canadian town of Hope. The last time Jasmine was seen alive, she and Ryan were leaving a nightclub in downtown San Diego at about 4:30 in the morning. Ryan returned to their hotel by himself, and Jasmine vanished. This was on October 13th. Ryan reported her missing 2 days later. The same day, her corpse was found. Ryan then went on the run. Police found his SUV in an empty boat trailer at a marina in Washington. When they found it, the engine was still warm. Ryan took his boat and crossed the border into Canada, evading Canadian authorities. He was found several days later hanging from a clothes rack by his neck. No note was found, and so police have never truly been able to find out what happened. Nobody knows what motive Ryan could have had for killing the model, nor why he traveled all the way to Canada just to end it himself. There may have been a third party involved, but we just have no idea. Number 2. Husband killer. When a man taunted his model wife, she killed him. Lilia Sudakova, 27 years old, is looking at a sentence of 15 years in prison for the death of Sergei Popov. She claims she was acting in self-defense and was a victim of domestic abuse. She says he was dead drunk at the time of the killing. He arrived home with some random girl to make Lilia jealous. But it was actually the night before when trouble started. He wanted to get busy, but Lilia wasn't in the mood. The whole act of bringing a random girl home the next night was supposed to be to show the model that he could have any other woman at any other time. It was a taunt, and one that landed him dead. Nobody really knows what happened that night. Lilia says he became aggressive and attacked her as she was cooking. She was cutting a tomato with a kitchen knife when Sergei grabbed her. When she tried to push him away, she accidentally stabbed him in the chest. But according to the prosecution, that's not what happened at all. Lilia stabbed her husband intentionally to get rid of him. The trial is still ongoing, and we don't know how it all ended for the young model. She has appeared in magazines in Italy, Japan, and China, and was even the face of a clothing brand in Moscow. But now, she might just spend the rest of her youth behind bars. And number 1, Olympic murder. Olympic runner Oscar Pistorius. competed at the 2012 Olympics. It was arguably the best year of his life. He shot to fame as a double amputee athlete. He even managed to hook himself a model, Riva Steenkamp. But on Valentine's Day of 2013, he threw all of the fame and success in the garbage by shooting Riva several times through a closed bathroom door at his house. In 2015, Pistorius was convicted of murder and given 13 years and 5 months. In 2021, after serving half his sentence, he went up for parole. But we don't know if he's going to get out of prison yet, because he first needs to meet the parents of the model he murdered. It's part of an initiative to give closure to the family of the deceased. But because of COVID, things have been a little tricky, and the Olympic runner is still waiting. It's hard to say exactly what will happen. The runner defended himself in court, saying that it was a tragic accident, and he claimed to have mistaken the model for a dangerous intruder on the night of the killing. Because he stuck to that story this whole time, we don't actually know what kind of motive he might have had for murdering the young girl in cold blood. Does the life of a model really seem so glorious after hearing these tales of horror? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching. If you haven't yet, remember to hit subscribe and come back again for more wild videos. See you next time.